I'm here with journalist Matt Taibbi in Washington D.C. You just gave a very eloquent speech in defense of freedom of speech, as every journalist should. One of the things that you said was that you were calling on people not just to criticize authority, but to defy authority. And the origins of this event, this Rescue the Republic event, are in the event in 2022, which was Defeat the Mandate. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who attended that event, who spoke at that event, had in fact defied authority by refusing to take vaccines that were mandated for them to take in order to keep their jobs. And those people paid extremely high prices for that defiance. They lost their jobs. Some of them lost their homes. Certainly New York. What is your thought about the relationship between censorship and that kind of mandate?
So here's what I would say. First Amendment was designed for exactly the situation that happened with the pandemic. The whole idea is to prevent government from having a monopoly on information because governments make mistakes. In the case of the pandemic, they made a whole slew of them. They told us the vaccine prevented transmission and infection. They told us that they lied to us about the effects that it had on children. They told us that we would die if we didn't get the shot. They lied to us about the infection mortality rate, all these different things. So the First Amendment is there so that independent voices can say whatever they want and people can judge for themselves. And the idea of the government going in and saying that it's going to prevent disinformation when it doesn't even know the truth. As a journalist, I know it's impossible to determine truth at the beginning of a crisis. Somebody's always wrong. So this thought process that they have of clamping down on information and banning and censoring people and de-ranking them and shaming them for not wanting to take the vaccine. I also can't stand the fact that they constantly blurred the lines between mandates and vaccines in their public messaging. They call people who are anti-mandate, anti-vaccine, and vice versa. But this exact situation is what we need the First Amendment for, and I think it's appropriate that this event grew out of that event.
Okay, so some of those people came down from New York. You saw some of them come in with the flag. There are firefighters who came in with the flag at the beginning, with Bravest for Choice. I don't see any of those people on stage though. Some of them are still out of work. There are hundreds of lawsuits ongoing from New Yorkers who lost their jobs. And I see, when I look on stage here, as much as I love to hear from you and respect your work, I see a lot of people who rose to prominence and did very well as dissident voices during the pandemic, but I don't see the people who suffered under those policies, and I don't hear their voices being elevated. It's a very difficult thing for those people who really paid for their dissent and paid for defying authority to be heard, even by the alternative media. What do you think about that?
I mean, I would say RFK is the patient zero of censorship. I mean, he's in every censorship scandal that I ever reported on, and that was almost entirely about vaccines. He's not the person who suffered, but yeah, obviously I would love for there to be more visibility. I think people don't know what people who oppose mandates went through. People are afraid to talk about it publicly because they're afraid of being shamed in their communities and all those things. That's unfortunate, but this is the nature of the media is that, you know, in the beginning of movements, this is who you're going to see on stages. But, you know, you just got to fight to get attention.
You know, those people, I do a podcast where I talk to those people, the New York Mandate podcast, and they've been talking to me, and many of them seek out other media attention. They want their stories to be heard. They want people to understand how they were affected by these policies. but it's very hard for them to. Why do you think that is? Why is
because
that
there's only like 9 journalists left in the country. We're all overloaded. I mean, in the New York Times had like one reporter who sort of kind of tried to do some reporting about, maybe the vaccine wasn't necessary for kids or something like that. And he was sort of massively clamped down even within that organization. There's no money behind this kind of reporting, right? So there were a few of us who were trying to do some things. I mean, I haven't really done a lot on this topic, but those of us who are, it's not that we don't want to, it's just that, we're overloaded. Let's put it that way.
Right, yeah. So. Is there any advice that you have as a parting word? I know you have to go. Is there any advice that you have for people like that, people who are not journalists, and who maybe try to speak on social media, but are facing real attacks on their civil liberties and are defying authority? Is there advice that you have for them in terms of being heard publicly in the public discourse and making their issues, part of the media conversation?
So you have to sue, right? And again, you heard me talking over there. People like me can go to a head of an internet company and ask for documents, and the company can say, "Yeah, sorry." But if you sue, you can get documents. You can get things that are critical information, and you can get it into the public record. And then you can get journalists to look at it, and maybe you can get a congressperson to look at it, and look, the routes for change in this country are pretty limited at the moment, but there are a few. I think right now, like for instance with speech, the fastest way to get something done is through a couple of committees in Congress. You will probably have sympathetic voices in Congress who have subpoena power and can get a few things done. But you got to have a case first, right? If you just talk about it, it's not. It's harder for people to investigate. So that's the one piece of advice I can give. It's like, as a journalist, if I know that there's a lawsuit, I can look it up on Pacer and see the exhibits. That makes it a lot easier and faster for me to do a story. So, that's one thing I can say.
All right. Okay. Thank you, and thank you for supporting free speech and opposing censorship.
Thank you very much.